You want some dusty drama? I've got you. The 19th century was basically a reality show with better handwriting and worse plumbing. Here are some real diary entries from the 1800s that prove humans have always been weirdos. Before he wrote War and Peace, Tolstoy was a 22-year-old mess. His diary is just an endless cycle of him setting impossible goals for himself and then immediately failing because he got distracted by girls or gambling. The plan: March 1851. 1. Study. 2. Write. 3. Be sensible. The reality: 2 days later, I wrote the above, and then I went to the gypsies. I don't know why I wrote it. I am a beast. A reoccurring theme: I must get up early. I must not play cards. Next entry: slept in, play cards. Lost 200 rebels. I am a pig. He is the patron saint of everyone who has ever bought a gym membership and never used it. Marjorie Fleming, the world's angriest 7-year-old, 1810. Marjorie was a Scottish child prodigy who died young, but she left behind a diary that is absolutely savage. She hated math, loved dirt, and had zero filter. On arithmetic, I am now going to tell you the horrible and wretched plague that my multiplication gives me. You can't conceive it. The most devilish thing is 8 times 7. Times 7 is what nature itself can't endure. On our behavior, I roared like a bull, and I would not go to bed. I stamp with my feet, and I throw my letters about. I am a little young devil. On her crush, I love Isa's hair, for it is very nice, but I think mine is better. This child was roasting the concept of math 200 years before TikTok existed. The Introvertator, 1838. The author of The Scarlet Letter was notoriously antisocial. He spent a lot of time sitting in the woods or his house, just judging people he saw. His journals are basically a People of Walmart blog, but for 1830s Massachusetts. July 28th, 1838. A man coming along the road. He was a queer-looking figure with a red nose and a patch over one eye. He seemed to be a sort of a walking caricature. On a party he was forced to attend. I went to a party this evening. There was a great deal of eating and drinking and a great deal of noise. I was bored to death. On a pig he saw. I saw a pig today. He looked like a critic. He was the original I wish I was at home reading guy. Alfred J. Bloor, the architect who hated Christmas, 1863. Alfred was an architect in New York City during the Civil War. You'd think his diary would be about the war. No, it was about how much he hated holiday shopping. December 24th, 1863. The usual nuisance of Christmas presents. I bought a few trifles for the children, but I am sick of the whole business. It is a tax on one's purse and patience. December 25th, 1863. A dull day. Dinner was cold. The turkey was tough. I shall be glad when tomorrow comes and the world goes on as usual. He is the spirit animal of every dad on Christmas morning who just wants to sit in his chair and not assemble any toys. A gold rush miner with regrets, 1850. William Swain traveled all the way from New York City to California to find gold. His letters, home star optimistic, spicy parts, and there were many, were written in a secret code she invented using Greek and algebra symbols. The entry decoded. She was all over kisses, and I, in my greatcoat, got upon her, and code grumbled her well. She was all astonishment and delight. Context. Grumbling was her personal code word for heavy manual stimulation. She often did this in very improper places, like the back of horse-drawn carriages, or in the study while the servants were in the next room. Samuel Pepys, the church multitasker, 1667. Samuel Pepys is the king of TMI. He wrote about the Great Fire of London, but he also wrote about being a massive pervert. This entry details his attempt to flirt with a stranger during a church sermon. The entry, August 18th, 1667. I walked to St. Dunstan's church and stood by a pretty, modest maid. I did take her hand, and the body was not withdrawn, and at last I did take her around the waist, and she made no show of resistance. I did have my full liberty of picking her fingers and playing with her hand, but at last I perceived to take her pins out of her pocket to prick me if I should touch her again, which scene I did forbear, and I was glad I did spy her design. Translation. He spent the whole church service groping a woman's hand until she literally pulled out a weapon, a sewing pin, and threatened to stab him. Franz Kafka, The Everything is Terrible King, 1914. Kafka, author of The Metamorphosis, was a man of intense moods. While the world was falling apart, he was usually just bored or hating himself. The entry, August 2nd, 1914. Germany has declared war on Russia. Afternoon. Swimming. The entry, January 1914. Unbearable, unbearable, unbearable. He just wrote the word 3 times. Mary Shelley, The Teenage Goth, 1814. Before she wrote Frankenstein, Mary Shelley ran away with the married poet Percy Shelley. They were broke, young, and dramatic. This entry is from when she was 16, roaming around Europe, tired and hungry. I was so hungry, I could have eaten the rocks. Shelley is in a state of high poetic frenzy, but I am just sick of walking. We slept in a room with a rat, who was quite a companion. James Boswell, The Armor Test, 1762. James Boswell, a famous Scottish biographer, moved to London at 22 and spent his entire time chasing women and terrified of STDs. In his London journal, he writes about using 18th century protection, which was made of sheep intestine and called armor. The entry, November 25th, 1762. I picked up a girl in the Strand, went into a court with intention to enjoy her in armor, but she had none. I toyed with her. She wondered at my size and said if I ever took a girl's maidenhead, I would make her squeak. I gave her a shilling and had commanded myself to go without touching her. I have no confidence in American beauty without armor. Virginia Woolf, The Wolf Letter, 1927. Virginia Woolf had a passionate affair with the writer Vita Sackville West. Virginia was intellectual and sharp. Vita was aristocratic and confident. Their letters are pure, distilled longing. The entry, Letter to Vita, saying that once, Virginia, I composed a beautiful letter to you in the sleepless nightmare hours of the night, and it has all gone. I just miss you in a quite simple, desperate human way. You have broken down my defenses, and I really don't resent it. I want you to come here and stroke my arm and say, poor Virginia, and that way you have. Gustav Flaubert, the Egyptian dancer, 1850. When the French writer Flaubert traveled to Egypt, he met a famous courtesan named, I'm sorry if I butcher this, Kachuk-Hanum. His diary entries about her are a mix of intense lust and bedbugs. The entry, she was just leaving her bath. Her skin was dripping with sandalwood oil. She put on a necklace of large blue beads. We went to bed. The room was filled with the smell of bedbugs and sandalwood. I felt her skin. It was cold and soft. The bugs were biting us, but we didn't care. Evelyn Wow, the stiff upper lip, 1920s. Evelyn Wow, author of Brideshead Revisited, kept diaries that were brutally honest about his drinking and his awkward sexual encounters during the Roaring '20s. The entry, got very drunk, sickness and sheer weariness, went to a brothel. The girl was fat and boring. I could not perform. She was very nice about it and gave me some tea. Cost me £2, a waste of capital. Here's the inflation roast of Evelyn's bad night out. The WTF economics of £2 in the 1920s. To put that waste of capital into perspective, in today's money, £2 in 1924 is roughly equivalent to $150, or excuse me, 150 pounds, 190 US dollars. A pint of beer in London back then cost about 6 pennies. There were 240 pennies in a pound. He spent the equivalent of 80 pints of beer on 20 minutes of awkward silence. The average working class man in Britain earned about £2 to £3 a week. Evelyn literally burned an entire week's salary for a factory worker just to get erectile dysfunction in a cup of Earl Grey. Gouverneur Morris, the peg-legged player, 1789 to 1793. Gouverneur Morris was an American founding father in Paris during the French Revolution. He had a wooden leg and was arguably the most successful pickup artist of the 18th century. He didn't just witness history, he slept through it. The entry, the lure hookup. Morris was having an affair with a noblewoman, Adelaide de Flout. I'm sorry if I butchered that. They needed a place to hook up, so they broke into the lure, which was then lived in by artists and nobles, not yet a museum. We take the chance of an eruption. I leave her to go to Mr. Jefferson's. No, he literally banged a countess in the hallway of the lure, and then immediately went to a meeting with Thomas Jefferson. In another entry, perspective. Her diary. She wrote about how she would dirty herself on purpose for him. Masa likes me best when I am black. I cleaned the grate and made myself quite black. He was pleased. Lord Byron, The Hair Collection, 1810s. We've mentioned Byron, but his diary detail and his trophies is next level. He didn't just kiss and tell. He collected samples. He kept envelopes of pubic hair from his lovers in his archives. The entry, contextual. Brian would catalog his lovers with the precision of a librarian. When he had an affair with the Italian Countess Teresa Guccioli, he wrote to his friends bragging about her stamina. She is a sort of an Italian Caroline Lamb, but with the strength of a peasant. Anne Frank, The Period Rant, 1944. We think of Anne Frank as a tragic saint. In reality, she was a teenager stuck in an attic who was fascinated by her own changing body. The entry, January 5th, 1944. I have a confession to make. Whenever I get my period, I have the feeling that I want to keep it a secret, and yet I want to be open about it. I can hardly wait for the time when I can tell someone, say, look at this, I've got my period. I feel as if I am carrying a sweet secret around with me. Dr. John Dee, 1580s. John Dee was Queen Elizabeth I's personal astrologer, mathematician, and wizard. He claimed to talk to angels, but his private spiritual diaries had a very earthly code. He used a specific alchemical symbol, a triangle with a dot in the center, to mark every time he slept with his wife Jane. The entry. The diaries are full of complex astrological calculations, and then suddenly just a list of dates with the triangle symbol. January 22nd. Triangle dot. Jane had them. February 3rd. Triangle dot. After the argument. The WTF. Sometimes he added notes like God have mercy next to the triangle. Historians are still arguing about whether that meant it was really good or really sinful. Anais Nin, The Queen of Lust, 1932. Anais Nin is the heavyweight champion of Saucy Diaries. In the 1930s Paris literary scene, she was having simultaneous affairs with the writer Henry Miller and his wife June. Her writing is less dirty joke and more intense literary heat. The entry about Henry Miller. I want to be the writer who reminds others that we know more than we admit. I have a fever. I am burning. I have a hunger that is not of the stomach. Henry's language. It's like a distinct taste in my mouth. I feel the weight of his body even when I am alone. Samuel Pepys, The Cheese Burial, 1666. We are going back to Pepys because this is the single funniest moment in diary history. During the Great Fire of London, the city was burning down. Pepys had to flee his house. He couldn't save anything, art, money, clothes. He chose his Parmesan cheese. The entry, September 4th, 1666. The fire coming on. I did dig a hole in the garden and put our wine in it, and my Parmesan cheese, as well as my wine and some other things. The context. Parmesan was incredibly expensive in 1666. He literally prioritized his cheese over his furniture. Sophie Tolstoy, The War of the Diaries, 1862. We talked about Leo Tolstoy being a mess. Well, his wife Sophie was the one dealing with it. They had a toxic habit. They let each other read their was the 19th